Our staff in the front, and I consider them to be our ambassadors of our brand, who we are, what we stand for, what we do, what we don't do. And I think it starts with that. For us services, we have what we call beyond the expectation. That's like our mantra over there, BTEs. You put yourself in a customer's perspective. You expect to come in, you expect to get served, you expect to have a decent meal, get a check, a server, that's good. They bring you the extra napkin, refill your drink when you need it. What is beyond that?
Welcome back to New York's Business Podcast. My name is Jacob Restituto. I'm the host and owner of Restituto Media, a full-service photo and video company based out of Long Island. Today I'm joined with Sosh, owner of Whalestail Northport, as well as Harborhead Northport, and until recently the owner of Lota Veco, which you just said you just sold. Yes. So I'm looking forward to hearing your story, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. Congratulations on the podcast. Very cool.
Fellow podcast owner, if you actually, I want to say that too. If you are interested in checking out his podcast, it's Behind the Blowhole.
Behind the Blowhole. So. Yes. A lot of fun. It's a lot of work doing this, so I commend you.
It is. People think it's just setting up cameras, but like you said, there's a lot of idiosyncrasies. Yeah, so for people that aren't familiar with your story, can you give a little backstory on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I grew up in the hospitality industry. My father was a CIA graduate. He had a number of restaurants, and so I think by the time I was 8 years old, I was bussing tables and working in his restaurants, and started in the kitchen probably around 12 and 13, and then I moved to the front of the house. I was managing my first restaurant by the time I was like 17, 18 years old. And I opened my first store with my father when I was 23, which I don't think many 23-year-olds should be owning their own businesses or restaurants at that age. I learned a lot of what not to do. By the time I was 28, I went into business. We had a commitment to do 10 units for a concept called Zimzari in Massapequa Park. And then we built another store, Mercado. I got out of that, made an exit out of that. And that's when I opened the Whalestail when I was 31. That was 15 years ago. And the Whalestail was never meant to turn into what it was. It was a seasonal snack bar that was there to service the marina members as an amenity. And we got there, and I opened it up with $30,000 on the swipe of a credit card. And we ended up having to rezone the property. And so we fought that for a couple of years. And with that,
rezoning from what to what?
So it was, there was a lot of covenants and restrictions that were attached to the deed that prohibited the use of a restaurant. Like I said, it was originally a snack bar that was there to service the members. And so, I was 31, and we went in there and we just started doing what we were doing. And they're like, you can't do this. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're just, so, we were fortunate enough to have the right counsel when we went through the process. And really, I think the media and the press gave us the support of the community, which was huge. And, I grew up in Northport, went to high school in Northport, and my kids go there. And it's been an incredible run. After 15 years, it's just continued to grow and grow. And then we opened Harborhead back in 2016, which was essentially there for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost was it saved us about $60,000 a year on purchasing of beer. It gave us also a default waiting area, a place where we were losing a lot of guests. Unfortunately, there's not really a place to go, so that retained about $500,000 a year on the property.
Wow.
From walking out. And we were able to work out some lease modifications that were in our favor. And it was a lot of fun. And then in 2019, I wanted to get back to doing what I originally did, which was like fast casual multi-units. So I developed the Lota Veco concept, and I wanted to do something close that was convenient, which was up the road. And so I found the spot, not the greatest locations, but the rent structure was perfect in East Northport. So I did it as a prototype, kept some of my key people working in the off season. And we did really well. Of course, we opened up 2 months before the pandemic. But the store did well. I was really pleased with it. And, I listed it for giggles, and I got the number that I wanted. So we unloaded it back in October, and here we are, figuring out what's next.
I'm really intrigued by, first of all, I'm a huge fan of Harborhead. My wife and I have been there countless times. We go all the time. It's the perfect spot. like you said, but I also want to talk about the business behind it, because I think that it's really, everything you just said is the perfect storm. Like whether you were the owner or not, like even if you were not the owner, the owners, that hypothetical owners, would have been super lucky to be right next to Whale's Tail, because like you said, it's the perfect waiting area. It's really interesting you retain that much business because of that. People say, oh, it's packed, we can't do anything. Oh, well, now you can get a beer and hang out. And also the beer is really good. But also the spot is great too. You get the sunset always, like you see the water. It's not, it's perfect. The breeze from the water, it's a really nice spot. So what's the brainchild of that? Where did that come from?
Well, the entire property as a collective it's really a representation of who I am as an individual. And I think anybody in business has to be passionate about what they're doing. And for me, I was born in Hawaii, and I'm a non-pretentious person. I'm shoes off, feet up, nice sunset, like you said. And so I wanted to create a place that I felt was complementary of that culture. So for me, the Whale's Tail, or the property, is not that I don't stand by any of the product that we do there, but for me, everything is about culture first. Everything else is secondary. And I'm proud of the stuff we do there, but the first things first is, it's like, I prefer to set an experience that's like, listen, I don't have that much of an expectation. I just want to kind of have a nice experience, have a handheld fish taco, enjoy some friends, and hopefully I'm pleasantly surprised. And that, to me, has been my mantra, as opposed to sometimes you go to these high-end operations, you have an expectation right out of the gate. And if you don't meet it, then you fall short. So for us, it's like, let's not take life too seriously. Like, we're not curing cancer. We make tacos. Ice cold beer, handheld fish taco, good friends. And for me, what's better than that?
I'm curious if you've seen your demographic change over the past couple of years. Because the reason I ask about that is because I've been going to Whale's Tail back when they were still $2 tacos. But now inflation's hit, and obviously that's not possible. But I've been seeing in Northport the whole demographic change, and I don't know if it's a social media thing or what. But it's a totally different demographic than when I was going 10 years ago. So I'm curious to hear your view on that.
Yeah, it is 100%. We saw it happening. It started about 10 years ago. And I want to say it started with the administration that was back there, was very pro-commerce. They did a lot down there. The theater, Sand City, even the Whale's Tail, and now at the hotel, Skipper's, its modification. You start to kind of create a destination. And what we've noticed is that I'd probably say half of our business is coming from outside the community.
Yeah.
And I think what you'll see is a lot of people that live out in like the 5 boroughs, instead of making their way all the way out east, you can have a similar type of experience instead of sitting in traffic for 3 hours. You got the water, you have the destinations, you have a vineyard, you have 2 breweries, things like that. And so we started to kind of make our changes to adapt to that kind of destination type of demographic. Still, nonetheless, your locals are your year-round support, but also the younger generation, you have to, I'm a fossil, I'm 47, and I look back now and I'm like, you have to try and get in the mindset and the thought process of the next generation. And certainly what I look at, which used to be all about the fundamentals of food and beverage, it's almost like 50% of my time now is focused on the fundamentals of food and beverage, and the other 50% is focused on media and entertainment. That's what the people are used to. That's how they find you, things like that. So
I couldn't agree more, and I want to hear about both of those, actually. I want to hear about the food and beverage fundamentals and what that means to you, and explaining on that, but I also want to hear about the media entertainment aspect of it. So could you start with the food and
Sure. For me, you can spend your entire life studying one specific trade. And if you're fortunate enough to take a shot and open up a business, and maybe you become successful at it, then all of a sudden, careful what you wish for, because you're only spending 10% of your time on the fundamentals, and the other 90% is the asset and liability end, right? So as you start to look at your numbers, and the profit and loss statement is like, it's a mathematical language, it speaks to you. So over the last number of years, you start to see things change. And one of those things that is changing is those demographics. So how do I stay on top of that? And you start to understand the thought process of your consumer. And like I said,
So when you say your demographics have changed, they've changed from what to what now for you?
like I said, what used to be predominantly local is now become a destination. People are traveling to find that hidden gem. And they're coming from areas that are a little more hip, things if you get people from Brooklyn, Manhattan that are coming out as a destination. It's a different clientele, it's a different demographic than the guy that maybe you grew up in high school with, who's raising his family. So you have a little bit of everything. Whale's Tail is very fortunate enough, and for me, my demographic is from 2 to 92 and everything in between. I want the old couple that's sitting there. I want the family with the young kids. I want the 20-somethings that just want to have a couple of drinks responsibly and have their friends out. And you got to find a way to find all of them.
So then, now what are you actively doing with the media and entertainment side?
So that's been the biggest challenge for me. When the pandemic hit, like most industries, business changed forever. And I knew that it changed. I didn't really know what it was yet. It took me a couple of years. And for me, what I believed it was that it was media and entertainment was becoming the predominant way of doing business in most industries, right? So we made a conscious decision to start to kind of put a little focus on behind the scenes. That's what Behind the Blowhole was, a little bit about what really happens behind the scenes of running a restaurant, almost like a little miniature reality show, comedy. It's funny, but it can be dangerous because, you have to tell your story in the way like, listen, we're trying not to take things too seriously. We're trying to have some fun over here. And sometimes people do, but that's okay. A little controversy is good for business. So by being a little controversial and telling our story of what happens behind the scenes, it started to really increase our digital footprint. And we started to kind of grow outwards in that regard. And for me, the one thing that I think is important in a lot of businesses is that you have to find a way to make up those lost margins that the pandemic took from us. And one of the interesting ways is that if you can increase your digital footprint, you have an opportunity to create sponsorship avenue with people that are like, listen, I like what you're doing. Let me become a sponsor of your program. So we get support from a lot of our associates, whether it's beer companies, food companies, things like that. That supplements some of the lost margins that we lost from the pandemic.
What would be an example of some of the lost margins from the pandemic?
Well, for example, definitely the payroll has continued to go up significantly. I'll tell you, when I started waiting tables 100 years ago, we were making $1.10 an hour. Mm-hmm. And it continued to go up. In 2015, the servers were making $5 an hour. So from 2015 to 2016, it went up to $7.50. That was just 50% in 1 year. That was $40,000 out of our net. Now, since then, it's now at $11 an hour.
Oh my God.
So you're talking, it was $90,000 out of our pocket in 10 years. That's just one example over there.
Yeah.
A lot of the other areas that I think the businesses have been getting hurt since post-pandemic is our insurance premiums have went up 25%.
Really?
I think a lot of insurance companies are like...
What's the justification behind that?
I think they're seeing a lot of what can happen, or they're trying to make up some of the lost money from the margins, things like that, or from the pandemic. So, our insurance has gone up. There's also a lot of liabilities that we're getting... that were cleaned up from, for example, a little boring crap, but for example...
Yeah, I'm curious. This is a business podcast. I find this, if I find it super interesting, I hope that the viewers do too. This is my talk. I'm like, wow, this is so interesting, taking notes over here.
The Department of Labor bankrupted the New York State Unemployment Slush Fund around the time of the pandemic by handing money out, right, to everybody. And so they borrowed money from the Fed to replenish it. So the state defaulted on the repayment to the Fed because they were $17 trillion in debt. So the Fed decided to recoup that money. They taxed all of the small businesses, the federal unemployment tax. That was $4,000 a year to me. That's just one thing. And then you have interest assessment, surcharges, things like that. And that's just one. It goes all the way down the list and all kinds of things. So I want to say that I've had like an additional $10,000 to $15,000 in just kind of liability hits of repayment plans. The insurance went up $10,000 a year. So by the time you're done, what we used to make traditionally pre-2015 was 20 cents on the dollar. Right before the pandemic, it was around 12 to 15 cents on the dollar. Now, restaurants are 8 to 10 cents on the dollar.
That is incredibly less than I would have ever imagined.
So, and I'll put this in perspective. So my wife is a Suffolk County police officer. She does great. She works 40 hours a week, has a good job. She can make the same amount of money with half the time, pension, benefits, no headaches, as the same as an owner who has a $2 million a year restaurant.
Wow.
And a $2 million a year restaurant will essentially cost you $750,000 to $1 million to open. So it's like the risk versus reward has changed significantly since pre-pandemic.
That's wild to hear. So at this point, would you say that it's really less about making money, more about passion?
I think passion fuels success in anything that you said you're a musician, so I'm sure you understand that completely. But it also creates impulsive behavior, right? That's how artists operate, right? Like I love developing restaurant concepts. It's a blank canvas. It's a form of art, something that I'm passionate about, and I love it. And you get the itch. But the game has changed significantly where it's like, what is the risk versus the reward? And what do I mean by that? It's not just about the money, it's the exposure, it's the aggravation that comes with it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm curious, almost like it's like you don't necessarily go into it at this point. I'm curious to make a ton of money because you're making 8 cents on a dollar.
Right.
Yeah, because you love it more than like, oh, I'm going to make a ton of money in this restaurant.
I think you can find different ways. But like I said, I think the media and entertainment aspect in any industry, I think is really interesting. We were in talks about doing a reality show down there. We signed some talent agreements. It was something we speculated on. You don't know what comes with that. Who knows? Multi-units. So a lot of business owners will get into restaurants for the exit. It's not about, yes, you can make a decent living while you're doing it, but the exit is sometimes 2 to 3 times net earnings on the exit. So let's say you have a successful run, you make a little living, and then you turn around and you sell it to somebody else. You can walk out with a couple $100,000. Not a bad little 401k. If you do multiple units, that's why fast casual, they increase in multiples. So for example, if you have 4 stores, each unit can sell at 4 times net earnings. So now, big restaurant groups will get together and, take a couple $1 million and come up with a concept and pop them open and then turn around and dump it in the secondary market.
So hypothetically, that would have been like if you had 4 Lota Vecos in 4 different towns, kind of.
Sure. Right. And that's why, you always got to speculate. And it's nice to kind of like the brewery was, everything has to have tangible benefit on what you do. You can't just do something because it's like, I like this, I'm going to give it a shot. There has to be multiple reasons why you do it. That way, if one thing doesn't pan out, like, listen, are we going to be a national distribution with Harborhead? No, but did we get a good lease extension and save $60,000 a year and save $500,000 from walking out the door and going to competitors? Sure. So that's a huge tangible benefit, right? But you want to keep your eggs in all the different baskets, right?
I'm curious, with Harborhead, was that an intentional decision as like a retention for customers, or was that more of like a, hey, I've always wanted to open a brewery and we just happened to save $500,000?
Like I had said, with when it comes to tangible benefit, there was a couple of factors for me. First and foremost, keeping the people on the property. Second, which was almost the same, was saving money on the purchasing, right? There is the chance that you could package the product and get into distribution, although I was very fortunate enough to speak with a lot of people, like the CEO of Shipyard. I learned a lot from him. He's like, there's no money in distribution. There really isn't. So he focused on doing brew pubs, the Sea Dog brew pubs. So, I mean, that's really hard. I want to say distribution, you have like the same chance as being like a garage rock band that get picked up by a major record label. So there has to be other reasons. When you talk a little bit about passion, was I really passionate about building a brewery? What I was more passionate about at that phase in my life was not being stuck in one specific segment of food and beverage. So I wanted to try something different. Certainly, it was exactly as I expected, challenging. You know, there's a lot that goes into it. For beer, 90% of it is sanitation, preparation, sanitation. These guys are scientists. They're incredible. We spent a lot of time going to Maine and working with Shipyard for a couple of years to understand that. I brought a brewer down from Maine, rented him an apartment. He helped get us up and running. And like any other industry, you can do all the preparation in the world, and you know you're going to get thrown the cogs in the wheel, and you got to bob and weave. And it's similar to a restaurant where it's like the brewers are like chefs. I never personally like to rely on skill set because, God forbid, something happens to those skilled people. You're left with like, what do I do now? So I try and do things where it's like, keep it simple. You know, and for us, it's like, let's make 2 products that are really good and reproduce them, as opposed to a million products that are changing and, oops, this one's not that good and blah, blah, blah. And those were some of the challenges that I found in there, similar to what I find in restaurants as well.
So prior to the pandemic, prior to, even after the pandemic, or even prior to Harborhead, what were you guys doing? Let's talk about retention rate, right? What were you guys doing at Whalestail to repeat customers or create repeat customers? Like, what's the goal for, like, how do you bring even somebody at Harborhead or Lota Veco, how do you bring somebody back? They come in for the first time from Brooklyn, like you said. What brings them back to the second time or to tell their friends?
There's a couple of things. First and foremost, for me, service is everything. And as much as I'll profess that I'm a service person, when you are playing a numbers game of 85,000 people during the summer that walk through our doors, you have to make your piece that you're not going to be at 100%. And that is very difficult as a young business owner. You know, I would take everything to heart. And somebody didn't like something, I would go get nuts. And then afterwards, you have to be like, listen, you have to say, am I doing the best that I can? If I wake up every day with the intention that I'm going to try and be better today than I was yesterday, it has to be good enough, right? And for us services, we have what we call beyond the expectation. That's like our mantra over there in BTE. And it's, you put yourself in a customer's perspective. You expect to come in, you expect to get served, you expect to have a decent meal, get a check, a server, that's good. They bring you the extra napkin, refill your drink when you need it. What is beyond that? Is it something like tying the little old lady's shoe? Or, you know, running after them because they forgot their sunglasses on the table and giving it to them? Or the little things like that is, for me, how I believe you retain a guest. And so that's something that's always very important. Our staff in the front are, and I consider them to be our ambassadors of our brand, who we are, what we stand for, what we do, what we don't do. And I think it starts with that. Definitely with that. Then, you know, as you continue to evolve, there's technological integrations that come into play that helps. Like, for example, we use a program, Pop Menu, where people will go on, they can scan QR codes, we offer them discounts, then we get them in the database where we have 20,000 people at our fingertips via email. So if you want to shoot them out, hey, we haven't seen you guys in a few months, here's 25% off, please come and see us. And things like that make a big difference. You have to evolve with those technological integrations because it changes every year. What you think you're doing great one year is all of a sudden, it's old news the next. Like with media and entertainment, right?
Yeah.
Changes so fast.
I'm curious, so you mentioned now that over the past 10 years, people have changed in the demographic of who you're serving. Originally it was, you know, a lot of locals and stuff, and now it's become more of like a destination spot. Do the destination guests push out the locals, or is it a combination of the two now?
That's a very good question, and always a concern. I think it has, in some sense, where it's like when we first opened up, you know, there was a lot of local support, and then what I would hear is, love the place, takes 2 hours to get in. They would stop going. And that bothers you. And you never want to go ahead and say, well, we're fine because we're not hurting for business. No, I don't operate like that. You want to try and encourage the people to come back. And I think it's every little thing you can do. For example, if our hostess, right, you get a 17-year-old nice young lady who's the first person that you see. And she may not understand what that local family is coming up with their 2 kids. They don't understand what kind of day they're having. They get in that minivan, they pack up the diaper bag, they got the apple juice, the little allergy food, and they go there and they wait 20 minutes just to get up to the girl. And they say, hi, how long for a table of 4? And she's like, 2 hours. And they're like, oh. I mean, that pisses people off, especially if you're a local. I mean, a local feels like this is your home stadium, it's your home. So for me, you have to go above and beyond. You have to be like, you know what, it is 2 hours. I don't want to lie to you, but come and enjoy the sunset. Come have an appetizer. If the kids get really hungry, we can pump something out for them. Check out our brewery. If you decide that you can't stay, and I understand, here's a free appetizer on us. When things are a little less busy, post Labor Day, come back. And that is a way to go ahead and encourage to retain your locals and let them know that they matter. I mean, you have to look at all the factors, you know, but yeah, you're not going to please everybody. It's hard.
No, but like you said, that's a really interesting way to go about it, especially because you guys are seasonal, like you said, which I want to touch on as well. But like, it does slow down at the beginning of the season, end of the season, so you could really, you know, cater to the locals then, and just by these, you know, I mean, gosh, man, I talk about all the time the opportunity for the missed opportunity I think that so many businesses have when they don't go the extra mile for the customer. Like, how much does an appetizer really cost? You know what I mean? And like, but that whole the retention of them coming back 6 times now and telling their friends, hey, you know what was actually pretty cool is we didn't get to go to Whale's Tail on Tuesday, but they give us a free appetizer, and I thought that was pretty cool. And now it's like, oh wow, that is actually pretty. It's worth so much more than however much that appetizer cost.
You want to get the message across to your guests that, you know, out of all the places they could go, if they decided to come to your establishment, that has to mean something. And you want them to know that you really understand how that you appreciate that, and whether it's just a nice word of appreciation or an appetizer or something like that. Never lie to them, but be honest and be like, thank you. Thanks for deciding to come here. You know, I'm sorry it's a 2-hour wait. It is. I don't want to lie to you, but thank you. Thanks for thinking of us.
I mean, there's a sense of humility in that as well. Like, rather than, oh, we don't need you,
You know, I'm fortunate enough that I've made a lot of mistakes in my career. And I think most business people, if they're sustainable in their craft, it's because they've learned from their mistakes. And humility is the number one. I mean, we're not curing cancer. We make tacos. Yes. So you gotta keep that in mind.
I want to talk about the seasonal nature of your business, and I've always been curious with how busy you guys are, because I'm a local. I've been there countless times over the past 15 years. Why you don't keep the inside inside open and running during the off season? I would have assumed that you would still get the local business at least.
Over 15 years, we've tried every little thing you possibly can. And we've been able to kind of, you know, rubber band the season out a little bit. If we're doing like 75% of our annual revenues in like 14, 16 weeks, you know, the other 42 weeks or whatnot is like, you know, we've been able to increase May, increase September, get a better April, get a better October, get a significant March, a significant November. And then really, you know, it's kind of like December, January, and February. I think for us, there's 2 reasons. One, we would open up to keep people on payroll working, because we would swell up to 75 people on staff. And every single year, it's like opening a new restaurant. It's so challenging.
Oh, wow.
So you keep the place open just to pay the people, right? But you're losing money. So it's like, hey, I can afford to lose a couple dollars, you know, in the off season. But then it's like, what is the retention value worth? Because I think there is something to be said for anticipation. I mean, I can tell you it's beautiful out today, right? It's February. We just opened up on Saturday for the season, and tomorrow's our first Taco Tuesday. It's going to be 50. I got to tell you, I sit home all winter and I'm gnawing at the sheetrock. So there's something about kind of leaving that house and saying, being like, you know what, the whale's tail's opening. And you almost get that bigger impact right out of the gate than kind of dragging it out. So there's part of that as well.
That makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. Yeah. It's people want what they can't have. And if they can't have whale's tail for 4 months, then when it's open and it's like, oh, I better get it while I can kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we've become like when we open up, and of course, you know, like we open up February 22nd, right? And you do a couple dollars and everybody that comes out. The person in February is as important as the person in July. So you have to make sure that they're getting that comparable experience. And sometimes I find challenges like that, and we have a great staff, but the truth of the matter is when a server is making that kind of money in July, their attitude is like, yeah. When they're making that kind of money down here in November, sometimes they're not there as well. And I've seen as good as you can be, and I'm guilty of it as well. I've seen, you know, attitudes tend to get a little deflated, and you don't want to make sure that your customer is having a compromised experience. So I think with part of that, as part of it, is that, you know, it's been hard for us to shed that seasonal identity. So it's like, let's just kind of be the beacon of hope that the snow is starting to melt a little bit.
Yeah. Obviously, you're like the birds that you start to hear in the morning. It's like, oh, hey, spring is coming. Hey, whale's tail's open and spring is coming.
Yes, absolutely.
We survived another winter. I want to talk about your role at your several businesses. Being that you've had Whale Stuff for 15 years, being that you've had Harbor Head for 6, and you'd had Lota Veco for. Were they both
5 years?
Were they both 2019? Lota Veco and Harbor Head.
Harbor Head was a year or two before, and
okay.
you know.
All right. So being that you've had multiple spots, and now you have the podcast and all the entertainment stuff that you do, what does your work-life balance look like?
I think that is probably the most complicated thing that small business owners struggle with, and I think when you're younger, you know, there's a lot of pride and ego that comes with the territory. And I don't want to say you feel invincible, but you know, you feel you're calloused and you're like, you know, I'm ready to take the punches, and you're like, I can do it. But there are things that get compromised. And you know, the first thing that gets compromised is family. And you know, I have a wonderful wife and 3 kids at home. They're my everything. It's like, what are you doing this for if you can't be with them? So, you know, certainly over the years, you try and simplify your business, the way you manage your business, and so you can have everything, really. So over the years, you know, whether it's like, you know what, let's just leave well enough alone and keep the whale's tail seasonal, like you said. Let's go ahead and open up Lota Veco because it's 5 minutes away. Maybe it's a C location, but it's convenient as opposed to going ahead and finding myself in, you know, Jericho, USA, and being handcuffed to it. So simplicity is everything, and it's taken many years to get to that point, and it's always a work in progress.
Yeah, it's the seesaw back and forth, trying to find that balance. It's like trying to walk on a seesaw. You kind of lean a little this way sometimes, you lean a little this way sometimes.
No doubt. And I think most people are smart enough to go ahead and say, this isn't working for me right now, so, you know, let me stop. That's the reason I know you had asked when I came in, I stopped drinking years ago, because it's like, you know what, as you're getting older, your body can't wake up and be sore and feel like that. And for me, it's like, why do I need to drink? I don't. And it's because I always felt like if I was unsettled within my skin, maybe I wasn't operating my businesses the way that I wanted to, or people weren't pleased with what we're doing, or you're reading a Yelp review and they're unsatisfied. All of a sudden you're being like, I'm not good enough. What am I doing? and now you felt like you need something to kind of mellow you out. And maybe that's a drink for somebody. Maybe it's buying a car, maybe it's things like that. And for me, you have to learn how to just be content within your own skin. That, you know what, you're not gonna please everybody. But if you try and do the best you can every day when you get up, it has to be good enough. And then you don't need things. And then your mind, body, and soul really, you can get up every morning and be like, I feel great. What do you got for me today? And when you're in business, it comes every day. Something's gonna be thrown your way. We have typically 3 lawsuits a year, always, and that's, it could be a slip and fall, it could be something else. And it's, when you're playing a high volume to high impact type of situation, it becomes a numbers game. And you can let that defeat you, or you can say, okay, let's just do the best that we can to go ahead and prevent these things from happening.
Yeah, I hear that. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the behind the blowhole. So is that one of the things you're doing? Is that the only thing you guys are doing for media and entertainment? Like, talk to me about so you said it's 50% food and beverage and 50% media and entertainment now. So what does that look like for the other 50%?
So interestingly enough, we wanted to kind of break into the media and entertainment world a little bit, and it's a challenging thing. As you get older, I didn't really understand it so much. It's like, when we opened the Whale's Tail, Facebook just came out. So I remember just sitting there like adding friends. when we opened and speaking to them, that's how it worked. And next thing you know, then you're on Instagram and, and the videos people are doing. So it's like, I felt that if you can increase your digital footprint, there's a couple things that can be done. One, you can create this sponsorship type of opportunity for your associates to be like, you know what? We're fortunate enough because we're such a high volume operation that a lot of the companies that we work with, beer and liquor, will go ahead, lend us support. What that may look like is $40,000, $50,000 a year back in support, whether it's in product placement, things like that. And so you use that to go ahead and give that back to the public, whether it's like Taco Tuesday or half off taps and apps, things like that. That helps create volume. So, you could put it in your pocket, or you can go ahead and give it back to the people. And I'd rather give it to the people because it comes back in volume, right? So that's one avenue. The other thing is, and I don't necessarily know if this is the right or the wrong way, but you got to try things, right? And sometimes a little controversy stands out. So we made a conscious effort to go ahead and have a little fun. And I mean, one of my passions growing up was comedy. I love comedy. Sometimes you lose your sense of humor in business. And so as I got older, I said, I want to have a little fun. So I said, let's kind of talk about the crazy things that happen behind the scenes in the restaurant business. And probably like most industries, it's chaotic. Certainly in restaurants, we're a little nuts. We're rough around the edges. And I find it comical. I remember sitting upstairs in my desk, and for years I'd be like, these kids are driving me nuts. They're always on their cell phone and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm going about it all wrong. As opposed to arguing with these kids that are on their cell phones, maybe you leverage it. You work with it. It's like in today's day and age, I told you they used to make $5 an hour. Now they're making $11 an hour. It's like the job description of the server needs to be re-identified. Make them part of your media and entertainment conglomerate. Use that phone, capture a video, post, recirculate the content out there. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do. And it's challenging as I'm learning it because it changes so fast, but it's fun. And some people don't love the things that you're doing. But if they're talking, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Who's your demographic for that, the audience of that behind the blowhole?
Well, as I had said, behind the blowhole, the demographic has definitely, believe it or not, it's actually been 50-50 between men and women, mid-20s to mid-40s. But we want to try and talk to everybody.
Like, would they just be like customers, or would they be like fellow restaurant owners, or?
For the most part, I think it's customers. However, the hospitality part of it, I think some business owners, we've actually, believe it or not, it's mostly outside local. I mean, we're getting a lot of people throughout the country. Brooklyn was a big demographic, but we were getting people all overseas who were listening to it.
How's it getting out there?
I think circulating some fun content. We did some marketing strategies where you paid some Facebook ads for a while, things like that. Picking right guests, like, we reached out to Big Ed, 90 Day Fiance. We just reached out to him one day just through Instagram, and he responded, and he called up, and he came out, did an event with us, and he has such a large footprint, and he and I became fast friends. He came back a month later, stayed at my house, was in my basement with the rabbits and the guinea pigs, and we became good friends. And sometimes the right guest can help circulate, you know what I mean? So, and then that brings another guest, and then, we've had some of your guests that you've had on, like Eric and Frank, the hospitality people in the industry are interested to hear what goes on behind the scenes.
It's funny because people think that, why would people care behind the scenes? It's like, it's no different than any other reality TV show that's on TV. It's just, instead of it being on HGTV or, Fox or whatever, it's on Instagram or YouTube or Spotify. And it's whether it be, 90 Day Fiance with like the behind the scenes of love, right? Or like the all those home selling TV shows. Where like you're like in like the Oppenheimer group, where like all the drama that goes on in that. It's like people just are curious about what behind the scenes. And of course, some of the drama is a little Hollywood, but
it definitely is. I think one of the challenges that I found with it is that it's easy to get caught up in it.
In what sense?
In following the views and the follows and things like that, where it's like, if you take your eye off the ball on the fundamentals of what we're doing. And, it's like anything, it's a learning curve, right? So, some of the things as I reflect back to the last year and a half of entering into the media and entertainment, it's like I said, we signed a talent agreement to possibly do a reality show, which they were shopping around, and it's still on the table, but it's like, what is the point? Like, you can have all the views in the world. What is it? Is it translating to revenue? Is it keeping the fundamentals of servicing your guests the way that you want it to, or can you get caught up? And you can. I got to tell you, I said, there was a little bit of, the sexiness of with some of even Big Ed, walking around Cal Harbor Day, everybody's stopping, and you become friends, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, what am I doing here? Right? I'm a taco maker. You know what I mean? And it can get away from you fast. But it's fun. You got to have fun. If you're not having fun in what you're doing, what the hell's the point?
What do you see next for you guys?
We have some uncertainty up in the air right now as we're kind of in the middle of some legal stuff, which I'm not going to get into. But you're always getting thrown those cogs in the wheel, and you bob and weave. I'm actively searching for other locations to do some other projects right now. And we'll see what happens. I'm always looking to see if there's an opportunity out there. And, I believe it or not, I have enjoyed trying to give back to the community a little bit in the sense where it's like, if you're lucky enough to sustain your career as long as I have, you learn a lot of what not to do. And one of the things that I love the most is these kids that come to us at 16 years old. They're like my kids. They don't know what's going on. They're a little lost. And you try and coach them. And they make mistakes, and you deal with it. It's like when I was younger, you get mad, and it's like, but do you get mad at a puppy for shitting on a carpet? It's a puppy. You know what I mean? You try and develop and teach these kids, and when they come back to you 10 years later and they're like, you helped me, and I got a family, I got a career now, I bought a house. That to me is like, you can't put a price on that. So I love, even, and thank you for inviting me out, because it's like, if you got something to say and you can strike a chord with somebody, that's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, Sosh, I really appreciate hearing your story, and for any of the listeners or viewers out there, if you're in the the New York, Long Island area, definitely go check out Whale's Tail or Harbor Head, have a beer at Harbor Head, and go have a taco at Whale's Tail.
I appreciate you. Thanks for the invite. Congratulations on all that you're doing,
Thank you
man.
very much.
It's awesome. Keep at it.
Thank you.
And thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So if you are a business owner or know any business owners that you think might be a good fit for this podcast, reach out or have them reach out, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a great day. God bless.